A mysterious man in a long coat commits the strangest bank robbery in Japanese history. This wasn't an armed robbery. It wasn't a hostage situation. There was no tunnel dug underground, no method you could possibly imagine. A bank robbery like this has never happened anywhere else in history. But even more than that, this story runs far deeper than just a bank robbery. Our story takes place in 1948, more than 70 years ago. At that time, the world had just lived through a massive event, World War II. Japan had been deeply involved in that war, and in the end, the United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Japanese Empire collapsed, and the emperor announced surrender in 1945. After the surrender, America occupied Japan and took over running the country. Conditions were brutal. Famine, homelessness, disease everywhere. About 3 years passed after the war ended, and then came 1948. Our story begins on January 26, 1948. That day, a man walked into a branch of a bank called the Imperial Bank of Japan. The branch normally had 21 employees, but that particular day, 7 of them had called in sick, including the branch manager himself. That left just 14 employees on duty. That day, a man walked into the bank wearing a long brown coat. He also wore an armband wrapped around his upper left arm like an officer's insignia. The armband marked him as an official government employee, specifically from the Ministry of Health. He approached the staff and asked to speak with the branch manager. They told him the manager wasn't in. He was out sick, but the deputy manager was available. The deputy manager, a man named Takejiro Yoshida, came forward and spoke with him. The man handed over his business card and introduced himself. A doctor from the Ministry of Health. He told them, "A well in this area has been found to be a possible source of a dysentery outbreak. We're trying to contain it and stop it from spreading, so I've brought medicine that everyone here needs to take." The deputy manager hesitated at first, so the doctor said, "I'm here under orders from the American authorities." The moment he said that, the deputy manager became completely cooperative. You have to understand, at that time, the Japanese had grown used to obeying the Americans, since they were the occupying power, and anyone who disobeyed could face severe punishment. So the deputy manager gathered the staff. There were also 2 extra people in the bank, the wife and daughter of one of the employees, waiting for him to finish work. Altogether, there were 16 people in the room. The doctor stood in front of them with small Japanese cups and asked one of the employees to bring a pot of tea. He poured the tea into the cups. 17 cups in total, 1 more than the number of people present. He told them, "The medicine I'm about to give you may sting your teeth, so you need to drink it quickly. I'll drink mine first so you can see the right way to do it." He then produced a small vial, dripped a few drops into one of the cups, picked it up, and drank it quickly in front of everyone. He said, "See, you have to drink it just that fast." He then dripped the same liquid from the same vial into each remaining cup, and all 16 people drank their tea quickly, exactly the way they'd seen the doctor do it. Barely a minute had passed when some of the employees began complaining that the medicine was burning their throats. The doctor reassured them, nothing to worry about, the burning sensation would pass soon. Shortly after, the employees asked to go to the bathroom to rinse their mouths. In that brief window, the mysterious doctor pocketed his business card, gathered his things, and went through the employees' desks, taking around 16,000 yen, along with a check worth 177,000 yen. As the employees began returning from the bathroom, many of them suddenly collapsed to the floor, one after another. Within just 15 minutes, the mysterious doctor had walked out of the bank, leaving 10 bodies behind him. One of the bank employees who was still alive staggered out of the bank, screaming for help. Police were called and arrived quickly. 6 employees were still alive at that point and were rushed to the hospital. 2 of them died there, leaving only 4 survivors. Investigators began examining the crime scene, and one of the first things they noticed was strange. The criminal had left behind far more money than he'd taken, even though he'd stolen a substantial sum. An even larger amount, sitting in an open vault right next to the desks he'd robbed, had been left completely untouched. The second question that baffled investigators was this: how did the criminal drink from the very same vial he used to poison the employees? The 4 surviving employees testified that they were certain he had drunk from the exact same bottle. So how did he do it without being affected himself? One of the 4 survivors was Deputy Manager Yoshida, who told police that the criminal had given him a business card with a name on it. Police searched the bank for the card, but it was never found. In the following days, investigators discovered the stolen check had been cashed at a different bank, several kilometers away. They went there immediately and requested the information the man had provided when cashing it. The bank handed it over, and police quickly discovered the name and address he'd given were both fake. That lead, unfortunately, was a dead end. Police were caught off guard by something they hadn't expected. 2 similar incidents had occurred at 2 other banks. The same man, in the same long brown coat, had walked in claiming to be a doctor, warning of an outbreak. The first incident happened in October 1947. He entered a branch of a bank called Pseudo and made the same claims, and the same ritual played out. But after 10 minutes passed with no effect on the employees, the mysterious doctor simply said, "Good, the medicine seems to have worked. Thank you for your cooperation," and calmly walked out. Investigators concluded he had been testing the poison and its potency. The second incident happened on January 20th, 1948, just a week before the fatal attack. The man entered a branch of Tokyo Bank, but this time the manager decided to check the bank's records and noticed the address didn't match. The doctor grew visibly nervous, left the bank, and never came back. Investigators found that in both earlier incidents, the criminal had handed bank managers a business card as proof of his identity, but the two cards carried two completely different names. The card from the second incident bore the name Dr. Yamaguchi, which turned out to be entirely fake, a person who didn't exist, but the card from the first incident bore the name Dr. Matsui Tei, and this doctor was a real person. Police tracked him down and arrested him immediately, but he was quickly able to prove he had a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Still, this wasn't a dead end. Dr. Matsui told investigators that those particular cards were a limited batch. Only 100 had ever been printed, and he had a distinctive habit. Every time he handed someone a card, he wrote the date and place on the back. He confirmed he had printed 100 cards and given out 92 of them. 22 recipients were ruled out immediately because they were women. 62 more were tracked down and cleared. That left just 8 remaining suspects. Among the 8, investigators began zeroing in on one man. In his 50s, a painter and art professor at a university. What drew their attention was that he had been arrested 4 times before for attempting to cash forged checks. And critically, he had deposited 130,000 yen into his bank account in the days following the murders, the very same week. When investigators asked where the money came from, he refused to explain. Police arrested him and took him to headquarters for extended, intense interrogation. They brought in the 4 survivors along with other witnesses, 11 people in total. Of those 11, 6 said flatly, "No, this is not the man." The remaining 5 said they felt some resemblance but couldn't be certain. Police assigned a detective named Hachiro Tsukamoto, known for brutal interrogation methods, capable of keeping a suspect at the interrogation table for dozens of hours without letting him move. After 3 days of this, overwhelmed by psychological pressure, the suspect injured himself and wrote the word "innocent" in blood on his cell wall. He attempted suicide twice more. 3 days later, he confessed. When he stood trial, he retracted every confession he had made. He said his verbal confession had come under torture, that he never signed the written one, and that the signature was forged. During the trial, explanations emerged for the evidence against him. The forged checks were attributed to a mental condition he developed after being bitten by a rabid dog, which led to a 3-month coma and a resulting memory disorder, Korsakoff's syndrome. The deposited money, his defense claimed, came from secret erotic illustrations he'd been selling. Even though the evidence was entirely circumstantial, after a trial that dragged on for nearly 2 years, on July 24, 1950, he was found guilty and formally sentenced to death. Here's the strange part. He was never executed. No minister of justice would sign off on the execution order. Imagine that. Ministers of justice came and went for decades, and not a single one of them was willing to take that final step. Death row inmates in Japan are typically executed within about a week of sentencing. He shattered that number by decades. During his imprisonment, he was allowed to keep practicing his craft, painting. Over the years, he painted more than 1,300 works from inside his prison cell. Despite the efforts of supporters and activists who campaigned for him, he remained imprisoned until 1987, when he died in prison at age 95, after 40 years behind bars. Even after his death, his family and supporters continued filing appeals for a retrial. In total, 20 appeals were submitted. Every single one was denied, the last as recently as 2015. Initial autopsy results confirmed a toxic compound containing cyanide, but the 2 universities that examined the bodies disagreed on the exact compound. One pointed to a cyanide derivative, a compound that was extremely difficult to produce, something an ordinary person simply couldn't make. And that compound, as it turns out, connects to something deeply unsettling in Japan's military history. There had once been a special chemical warfare unit within the Japanese army, known for a dark and secretive reputation, a unit that conducted dangerous experiments on human subjects. After the war ended, American authorities granted immunity to everyone who had worked within that unit, in exchange for the secrets they knew, which raises the question, how could a painter possibly obtain a poison like this? It seems nearly impossible unless he had a direct connection to that unit. A theory emerged that Japanese authorities pinned the crime on him specifically because they wanted to bury that truth. Even if he truly was innocent, that doesn't necessarily mean the real killer came from that unit. Someone may have obtained the poison some other way. If you have your own theory about what really happened, the comments are open below. And that's where our story ends.